morning, Lars. How are you?
Good morning, Jose. Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, very good. I got my 8 hours of sleep, so I'm ready to rock today.
Good
Let's
for
put
you.
it that way.
I'm not sure I made my eight hours, but close to it. So
Still fine, still fine. If it's about 7 hours, then it should be fine.
okay. I made the 7 hour mark, so I'm good.
Nice. First, maybe start with a quick introduction from your side.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Lars Crama, and depends a bit on who you ask. I'm the CEO of Innovation Quarter, but I've spent the past 20 to 25 years in helping ideas get to market. So I've been an operator, I've been an investor, I've been an ecosystem builder, and first and foremost, I'm a dad. So I think that says something about me. But in my current role, we manage a portfolio of about 350 million in particularly deep tech companies.
And I also saw that you are the founding father of Upstream Festival.
That's
Yeah,
correct. So
I've been there. Yeah, we met there actually. So
yeah,
interesting to see that.
yeah. So founding father. Well, Upstream is a love child. So it was actually the result of the ecosystem around Rotterdam and Delft really coming together. So the startup ecosystem and finding out that there's so many things happening across the region, but we wanted to bring that together. And I think back in 2020, so COVID times. Together, we created the first edition of what is a startup festival for founders and investors to come together. And yeah, I think I could not have dreamed what it is today. I think it's become a really unique place where people come together in Rotterdam. And yeah, we just met at the most recent edition, the sixth edition in May.
Yeah. It was a great event. So let's say thank you for doing it and supporting
Perfect.
the community.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's get started with the questions without losing too much time. So the first question is, how do you define success in business, given your role, your title, and what actually drives you? And quantify it if you can.
Yeah, it's a big question. But maybe start with what drives me and what I strongly believe. And I think I've written this in multiple occasions. I believe that entrepreneurship can be a driving force for positive change. So that's deeply embedded in who I am and what I think I want to work on also in the world. And then if you connect that power of entrepreneurship to some of the big challenges we have in the world today, I'm looking at food and health. I'm looking at energy transition. I'm looking to digitizing our society, but also making sure we are a resilient society. Then I strongly believe that entrepreneurship can be a driving force to make those things really happen and go forward. So then when you look at, what is success, it is to what extent have you been able to use entrepreneurship to drive the big change in those areas. And to bring it a bit more to myself. So yes, that is when entrepreneurs build great things that change the world for the better. That's one. But a bit more closer to home and what I focus on, I'd like to focus on is have I been able to help those entrepreneurs or ambitious people to really do more than what they could do on their own. I think that for me is a real metric of how
Yeah.
I look at success. And the second part, I look at have I been able to create an ecosystem, so an environment in which these companies and ideas can flourish. So for me, success it's about individual companies and founders, but it's also very much about the ecosystem. And then I think I'm in the third quarter of my life/career, and I noticed for me it's most important to create things that outlast my involvement. So it's far more about helping others be successful.
So that's why you move towards deep tech then, to
Yeah,
create
so
long-lasting technologies and high impact.
yeah, that's interesting. It's not just about the deep tech. I think it's more about the deep problems that you want to solve. So first half of my career, I spent a lot in marketing automation. So we were doing like very sophisticated. So my career started actually in e-commerce in the dot-com boost, which was all about digital tools. Then started using analytics to really make smart decisions, do marketing automation, that kind of, it's really important. And I think you can build great companies. But somewhere along the line, I realized, is this really the big problem I want to fix in the world? Do I want to help a commercial company create more revenue, or do I want to focus that attention on real big challenges in the world? And I got interested in circular economy, which really looks at how you reuse. Well, you're in the forest. Your background is a forest, and I think the best technology in the world is nature. So, what can we learn from nature to kind of redesign processes? But then you also look at solutions, quantum technology or biotechnology, or there's so many great technologies out there, and I've just found myself to want to spend more time on understanding how these new novel technologies can really help drive bigger change than just more revenue for a corporate.
Okay, okay. So yeah, so this way you define the success as well. And would you say that you are successful or still getting there?
I hope I'm getting there. I think you only know in hindsight if you're successful. But I think that the definition I just gave. So I really try to dedicate it. I really try to dedicate my time to helping others grow. So I'm getting there. That would be my
Okay.
my honest answer. I think if you so the reason that's interesting, right? So the reason for me to step out of entrepreneurship and to actually lead the organization I lead today. So we are with approximately 120 people. We are backed by government, so we're basically investing public money into private companies, which is super interesting. And the reason for me to do that is I believe I can make more impact with my skills, abilities, networks, etc. in this current role than I could previously in my other roles. So I'm still looking for ways to become more effective, you could say.
Okay, okay. And then to achieve the success you just defined, which is creating impact in, yeah, in social or in an environmental way, if a successful business can be built on three key pillars that enables this impact, what would it be?
Team is always going to be in there, right? So do you have the right people around the table? The second thing I would say is actually strategy on how do you make sure that that team works on the right things. And then the third thing, which I think often is overlooked, which is difficult to influence but important to understand, is timing. So team, strategy, timing for me would be the three pillars that define success.
Okay, very well, very well. Which one do you think is the most important one for you?
I think
Yeah,
they're all important, but obviously it's so basically if you a great team can work with a mediocre strategy, and even in bad timing, a great team will find a way to work around it. But I think having a weak team makes all the other things less important. So yes,
yeah.
team would be the most important one.
And how would you define a successful team? Let's get into the to the depth.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've looked both at, so in my own investments, I obviously looked at team composition. So founder teams, how do they work together? How do they complement each other? Which is always something I think you look for when you first are building a team. So are you looking at complementary skills, complementary values, complementary traits that actually help? So I think that's one part of really asking about, but also analyzing when you build teams. Do we complement each other? Is there diversity in thought across the
It's
team? I
like
think that's
the
one.
hacker, hipster, and hustler
Yes,
triangle.
hacker, hipster, hustler, and I wrote a blog about it that he actually the hacker, hipster, hustler analogy might miss a fourth one. So I used the A Team as an analogy. Well, maybe you're a bit too young for watching the A Team, but in the 80s it was a very serious television series, and they basically had four roles. And I think the short story there is that I think the execution power, which was BA, the guy who was always doing stuff, I think that's something that's missing. Anyway, I'll share the
Okay,
blog post on that. But true, having diversity in that, I think that's definitely one. But I think once you have the team, once you have that in place, what I also look for is the learning velocity. So how fast is this team able to learn? So if they take an idea, if they test it, if it proves invalid, how fast can they turn around and turn that learning into something new? So I think that's something, it's a bit harder to measure, but it is when you go in and when you work with people, you try to test how fast they can learn. So I think that would be a second thing I look for. And then all things come in three. So if I'd have to look for a third thing, it's the energy in the room, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
I always look at a team, would I hire these people again if I'd have to do it all again? Is the energy right? Do I enjoy working together? Because I think that's super important. You're spending a lot of time together. You don't always have to agree. I think, in fact, disagreeing is part of a strong team, but you do need to feed off each other's energy and make each other better. So that will be the third thing I measure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay, then moving slightly towards the next question. Based on what metrics, questions, or processes or indicators do you assess the team's speed of execution? Or like, how do you decide when you are about to make an investment decision?
So maybe I'll give you the general answer and then how we do it today. So in the past, I also tried to really, so we did a test with real drives to actually look at team composition and to see if team composition influences business success, which becomes a real data-driven almost academic thing. And I think the hard part there is that you cannot predict everything because then obviously I just mentioned timing and strategy are also very important. So, but it does start with measuring team composition. So I think also when we look at teams we invest in or even the teams at Innovation Quarter, our own teams, we use some kind of methodology to understand talents, motivations, ambitions, so you can help team composition. I think that's important to start with a shared language also about around that. And then I think the part about learning velocity is really measuring outputs. I'm a big fan of Kanban style way of working, right? So when you really try to optimize the flow of work, so how many topics can you actually move through, which says something about the speed of decision making in a team. So, and that's something you can measure without making it very academic. I think you can, set up a Trello board or a to-do board and actually measure how fast are things moving from one place to the other. So that's when you're inside a team, I think, a really practical way of measuring. And then the third thing, which is also about that learning speed, I think coachability. So when we invest in founders, or when I invested in founders, yes, I look for that, visionary founder who has a really idea about the thing they want to change in the world. But I also look for coachability, or at least ability to listen. Because if you are not able to listen to advice or feedback or coaching, then it's going to be super hard later along the line to readjust your course. So I think that's something. Again, I think that's hard to really measure and quantify. I think you can only do that relatively, so high, medium, low. But you do need to measure that, I think, when you start working with a team or building a team of your own. But I think particularly that works. It's important for the founder.
Yeah, yeah. I do tend to agree with your points. Like, I've also heard a lot of people say the execution speed, and yeah, just basically how fast can the team go. That's the most important thing in the AI era, I think. But
Yeah.
do you have a methodology, questionnaire, or like a system to understand the founder profiles, or do you have any? What do you base your analysis on? Like past data or traction until now? So if you can give some insights.
Yeah, so I think that depends a little bit on the type of company. So for our
Okay.
early stage funds, we obviously have milestone agreements. So we just set a number of milestones that you need to meet to make your the next part of your investment. So I think that's really clear, and that's also often quite specific to the company. But that says something about how fast can you validate or invalidate the things that we wanted to invalidate, and how fast can you move to the next stage. So I think that's really built in the investment processes. Um, To be very honest, I think the part of measuring team composition, we're not doing that across the board yet. So I am working on also doing that with our own teams. So maybe start with your own
Yeah,
organization before you ask from others. And I'm a big believer in doing a team scan and having every employee fill out one of those, whether it's Real Drives or whether it's GITP, whatever tool you use, but make sure it's consistent. So you can measure over time, and you can also learn what type of profiles drove faster execution, what type of profiles you maybe have too many of, and what you have too little of. So I think that's what I really look for. And then I'm a big fan of TMA, talent motivation assessment. So talent says something about the talent that is really ingrained in you, something that you have a superpower. But
yeah,
your motivation is really what drives you forward, where you want to go, what you want to work on, what type of challenges excite you. Are you more the strategic visionary type, or are you more the execution type? Do you want to get into the details? And I think understanding that from everybody on your team and everybody that you're onboarding on your team is crucial. And I think that also changes over time. So, right, when you're starting a company, you might need different profiles than when you are in the scaling up phase. And it changes again once you become a mature, grown company. So if you run like a 300 FTE plus company, you need different types of profiles in the room and also in your leadership team than when you just start out as a company. So that's what I would always look for. And you can do it in a really simple way with a free online tool. But my suggestion would always be to start doing that the right way, so you can also track it over time.
okay, okay, very well insights. And in any point of this process, do you leverage AI to get the outcome you wanted?
Yeah, I think so. The thing is, I think we're underestimating the power that AI brings to any organization, and I'm still struggling with the whole concept of emails and the time we spend in our organizations on writing them, reading them, and reviewing them. And I think we're in a transition phase, right? So we now see the opportunity. We also see some of the risks of AI. I think we see we see agents actually taking over some of the really boring processes, but also creating new things. So I think we're in a super interesting space. I think we're also still very much underutilizing it, also in our organization. We're scratching the surface, I guess. But to make it really practical, your question of how you use it. So in our organization, 120 people have been trained on not only understanding AI, but also using it in their daily work. So everybody, and we come from a different background than a startup, right? So we have people that have a different view on the world. So it might seem like we're late to the game, but in fact, we for our type of organization, we're pretty far. Everybody has been trained to use AI, to know how to use AI. And there's been a front runner group that is actually building in our organization ideas based on AI to make our work better. And it's always on two angles. It's either saving work or increasing output in our case. And for this year, we put a key result, so an OKR. I think you're familiar with the
Yeah,
way of working, that said save 10,000 hours per year in our primary processes using AI. So the team is actually looking at what are we doing in the real world, where we're spending time, how can we be more effective, and then many ideas come by, and I think one of the interesting examples that was launched I think a month ago is we do foreign direct investments. So we look at international trade fairs and we see what companies are there, and then we have a conversation with them to bring them to the Netherlands. And there's a lot of manual work in that, and our teams have been going through websites, etc., and putting that in Excels. And based on this 10,000 hour challenge, the team came up with a solution to basically build an agent for that. And now the work is done in minutes rather than hours. And then you see those kind of examples are the starting point. They now save, I think, 2,500 hours, 2,500 hours per year with just that application. And I think that's what we're really looking for.
wow. I heard a lot of people that uses AI to optimize process, but it is important to, as you said, set some goals and work for that, which does make sense.
Yeah, because the flip side, and there's quite a AI also sometimes just creates more work, right? Because if everybody's
Sometimes,
using an
yes.
agent to start responding, we're creating all this mess,
Yeah,
and then it becomes more about the attention that you have than about the output you create. So it's interesting times.
yeah, yeah. You need to exactly know how you want to do and what you want to do. Otherwise, it just creates a lot of extra work, which instead causes you time.
Yeah, true. But and while we say that, I think if I would redesign a business, so if I would design a business today, um, I would start obviously AI first, and I think that's the interesting part about companies that are getting started right now. I mean, I always thought you have to build a company with a certain structure, with a certain team composition. That as the company grows, you need more people. But I think we're seeing examples of agent-driven companies that only employ like a handful of people that are really doing epic stuff. So,
Yeah,
and yeah, if you start with a clean slate, it's slightly easier than when you have an existing company, but that shouldn't keep us from trying.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then on to my favorite question. What is one fundamental assumption about how business work? One you believed or one is widely accepted as truth that you now consider as a dangerous hallucination?
Yeah, and you sent me this question beforehand, but so I maybe gave it a little bit more thought than I should. But I maybe it's an obvious one, but still I'm gonna share it here because I used to think that but I think quite a few people around me in the past thought that if you just have a great idea, success will follow. Right, so just that big idea. Once it's born, you will be successful, and I think I've seen so many entrepreneurs, but also investors and just people struggle with that because ideas are everywhere. Ideas are abundant. Also, when we get, for instance, questions for NDAs on certain ideas, I mean, your idea has probably been out there 500 times at the same time. It's about the execution and timing that really makes a difference. So it cost me quite a few lessons. So particularly on timing, sometimes your idea is great, but it's just too early or too late. And I think we've seen plenty of examples. I sit in a group of angel investors, successful angel investors who've all exited their companies. And then when you have a conversation with them, well, their idea was nice, but it was just that the timing was right, right? It was the
Yeah,
starting of digitization or whatever it was. And the funny thing is, these entrepreneurs sometimes think it was them. And yes, they made a successful company, but then they try a new business thinking that they would succeed again and they fail miserably because they realized that their idea in that time was what really made the difference. So I think timing is more important than just the idea. And then the other part is execution. So it's the pushing forward and trying again and falling and doing things over and over. And I think that's the hardship for any entrepreneur. If you knew upfront what you were about to do and all the things you'd have to go through, you probably wouldn't do it. So in
yeah, I
hindsight,
can
it's always a
understand.
nice story, but when you're in the middle, it feels messy and it feels quite uncomfortable. And there have been quite a few projects that I got involved in that if you would have told me beforehand what it would take and what it would cost, I would have definitely said no way. But when you're in it, you're making it happen. And we have one project I was involved in. Was the So I was getting into the circular economy space, and an impact investor had bought a 12,000 square meter deserted swimming pool. So just imagine, well, square meters, I don't know how to translate, but it's huge, right? It was an old subtropical
Yeah,
swimming
yeah,
pool, kind of a dystopic view. And the idea was to turn that into a circular incubator, a circular economy incubator, which in the end, it worked, but it took 10 years and a lot of hardship and weaving through all kind of challenges. So I think in hindsight, it's a great story, but when you're in the middle, it sucks.
yeah. For me, the point of view I look at it is the founder or the entrepreneur should. I mean, that's for everyone, not just for entrepreneurs, of course, but the ability to pivot Because
Yeah.
as you said, there is a lot of ideas out there. Some of them are good, but good ideas are not always successful. Some of the ideas are bad, and then you can always pivot them. And yeah, if you can pivot once you know that the idea is not going to work, I think that's when you become a successful entrepreneur. And
No.
for
Yeah.
for all of the entrepreneurs I've seen out there, like there's one now, a unicorn founder, Turkish entrepreneur, doing completely something else about, if I don't remember wrong, like the rental of wedding clothes. And now
Hmm.
they have Martech company worth 1 billion euros. So it's just crazy to see how it just evolves over time.
No, that's true, and I think that part of resilience about entrepreneurship, right? Trying so you're saying that the pivoting is one, but I think then also pushing through and
Yeah.
keep doing and staying a bit longer than people would expect. I think that's if you look at many successful entrepreneurs, it's just they just sticked around and they kept trying and they kept pushing, and that is a bit that stubborn part I think of moving forward. But you mentioned one important aspect of that as well, and I think that's what I see both with more impact driven or also deep tech founders is we don't like to talk about money, but you do need to create value that somebody's willing to pay for. And I think
Of
that's one
course.
part
Of
that
course.
quite a few founders also understand too late. But because yes, you can get investors, but investors will only invest in you if there's a potential market in the end. So I think finding out where it is that you create value and also making sure that you validate that somebody's willing to pay for that. I think I see quite a few founders somehow miraculously forgetting that part, and then it becomes super difficult because and this is also about the size of the opportunity, right? So we're, for instance, we're in hydrogen companies that are building new forms of energy systems for hydrogen, and in that space you really need to understand where is value created, where can you create value, what is the price that people are willing to pay, because that makes a huge impact on which strategy you follow. So yeah, following the potential money, I think, is key as well.
Yeah. I do agree. There's nothing I can add to that. Okay. Maybe reflecting a bit on the future now. How do you see what it will take to be successful as a person or as a business shifting over the next decade, given that everything is happening with the boom of AI, social media, the the impatient Gen Z entering the workforce, and all this economic and political shift happening?
Yeah. So the interesting part is people have always looked at the next generation as something special. So I think that's a common thread. If you go back 200 years, the next generation is always different. And I'm an optimist, so I think the next generation will actually build also the next generation of companies. But I think my first big turning point in life was the dot-com bubble in 2001, which obviously 2001, which created a big upheaval, but also big opportunity. I think if you see some of the big companies that came out of that are super interesting, and also we learned a lot about it. And I think we're now in that next phase, particularly where AI is driving a lot of change in many ways. And I think the biggest change from the next, let's say, 20 years compared to the past 20 years is that we used to live in a world where information was scarce, and a lot of companies were building their unique proposition around that scarcity of information. And I think we're really moving to a space where anybody can find any kind of information at any time. And using AI also applying that. And so I think the biggest shift will be how do you manage your attention? So I think that's the challenge for anybody working in a team. How do you, with all those opportunities, how do you focus your attention on that one thing you really want to change in the world? I think that's becoming a big challenge. And I think also the new generation who has been growing up with TikTok and everything coming by, how do you focus your attention on what you really want to change? So you become a producer, not a consumer. I think that's for individuals super important. And then for businesses, that translates into the same thing. So how do you create value in a space where anybody else with an idea can move into that space also really fast? And I hope, but that's my maybe a bit my personal color in this part of my career, but also how I look at the world. I really hope that this next generation of business leaders, of people working for companies, is looking for ways to contribute to society. So what can you do to not just make it better for your kids, but make sure you do 7th-generation thinking, right? So the kids of the kids of the kids of your kids. How can you create a better world? And I think more than ever, we have all the technologies we could dream of. So AI can do a lot. I think when you look at quantum computing, for instance, the impact that it has on health, on resource design, it's immense. So I hope people look into that space. If you look in biotech as a technology to understand how human life is created, formed, etc., how we can move away from, let's say, the old school health solutions that we now have. If you look into robotics and the opportunities that brings for helping workforces, but also helping care, looking at new ways of energy. So there's so many technologies out there that I hope the new generation will look into to really build a better future. Anyway, amen. That was it.
So you're a big optimist, I understand.
I'm an optimist. So I'm a serious optimist, though. So I think also we've been living under this. I'm not sure about your age, but I've been speaking to some younger people that say they don't want to have kids because the world is coming to an end. And that kind of dark view of the world. I'm an optimist. So I think technology can help us a lot if we're smart with the technology. I think also re-understanding nature. So again, going back to the forest where you're sitting right now, kind of reconnecting ourselves with nature as a whole and understanding how we are part of that ecosystem. I think if you can blend those two things, tech and nature, I think you can go a long way. Yeah.
Good. Okay, and now I asked you a lot of questions, but this time I give you a chance to ask a question. If you were able to ask a person you think that is successful, one question to understand how they achieved what they achieved, what would that question be in a similar context, of course? And you can ask this to a specific person or to to everyone to answer.
Well, to a specific person, I would ask. So the thing is, we look at these entrepreneurs, whether it's Elon Musk or Jensen Huang or those people that are really building extraordinary businesses, and we always see their success story. I think the one question I would ask them. What is the thing that you stopped doing? Because we always look at the things they did, but what is the thing you actually stopped doing that helped you become successful? And I think that's a question that any business leader, but also entrepreneur, can ask themselves. There's always opportunities to do more, but what is the one thing you should stop doing as you go forward? So that would probably be the question I'd ask. Maybe to Jensen Huang.
Okay, good to know. All right. Thank you for coming. And lastly, is there anything that you would like to ask from our community of listeners here?
I think your community of listeners. So my question would be a link to my personal mission is, think of how you can help others grow. So what did you do today to help somebody else grow? I think that would be my question. And if you want to make that practical, you just mentioned Upstream Festival. I would say go there and help founders grow. I'm also part of a great community called Super Connectors. If you Google Super Connectors, that's an organization that helps founders get connected to others to help them grow. So I think any listener wanted to go to Upstream Festival or Super Connectors would be of great help to the next generation of founders.
Perfect. I noted that down. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, it's just always good to see other perspectives, because everyone I talk to just gives me amazing information, and that's why I like this podcast.
Well,
but thanks again.
I think you're doing great, and it was a pleasure, Jose. And good luck on the next episodes. And see you next time.
Yes, see you.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.